2 weeks.
All right, good morning. Thank you everybody for joining us for our exciting parent education event from the counseling department. We are so excited to welcome all of you for this very important topic and very important conversation with a friend and colleague of mine who I admire, Virginie Goldstein. And as you know, it's on teen screens and parenting tools. And I'm going to just talk for a little bit awkwardly to myself before we get started because I want to give people a little time to log in, get settled, and I'm just going to go over some kind of general information things. So please note that we are recording today's session so that other people can view it and learn from it later. So we are being recorded. Right now, we should have the Q&A open and also the chat open. So if you have questions as we go through our presentation today, please put them in the Q&A. We are going to leave time at the end to get to as many questions as we can. And we'll answer them together as a team for you guys, depending on your question. The chat should be enabled, so you should be able to go in if you wanted to kind of let us know something or put something in the chat. You're welcome to do that too. And just going to give everyone else kind of a moment or two to log in. Thank you again for being here with Notre Dame School and Virginie Goldstein. This is honestly one of my favorite things I get to do as my job is creating and supporting these events for everyone. And I think what I will do now is we want to make sure we use our time well. So I'll just get started with a couple quick introductions from myself and Ms. Athanador. So welcome and thank you for joining us. I know many of you are ND parents, but I also know that there are a lot of other people from the community who have joined us for this important topic. We welcome you. We will be presenting for about 45 minutes and then leave time at the end for some questions. So my name is Heather Valentine. I am the head counselor here at Notre Dame San Jose High School. I'm a licensed marriage family therapist and I have been at ND for, I think this is my 12th year, and also have seen clients in a small online private practice as well. And I would love to introduce one of our other fabulous counselors, Celeste.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Celeste Fanador. It is not my 12th year. It is my first year at ND, but I came from Santa Clara University and have been in academic environments and settings within the counseling realm all since freshman year in college. I'm really looking forward to being part of this team and really ultimately, especially today, collaborating with all of you. Because all of you are part of the team just as much as we are, as we focus on our students' well-being, both in and out of school. So I'm really looking forward to getting to know all of you better, even virtually, and supporting your students every day. Thanks.
Awesome, thank you. All right, well, I would like to start off next with kind of introducing our speaker and telling you a little bit about her. I have known her now for a number of years as I've worked at Notre Dame. So Virginie Goldstein is a licensed marriage and family therapist. She is licensed in California. She also practiced as a neuropsychologist when she was living in her native country of France for 20 years. She received a double master's degree in clinical psychopathology and neuroscience from the University of René Descartes in Paris. She specializes in working with children, adolescents, families, and adults who are struggling with mental health issues. She's also worked for a local mental health agency where she created and ran an intensive outpatient program for adolescents who were struggling with severe anxiety, depression, suicidality, self-harm, school refusal, and other really important things. She's furthermore presented multiple research works at AACAP, which is a national and international psychiatric conference. And then within the last number of years, she has created her own unique method to treat children and adolescents who have addiction to electronics and screens. She continues to support the youth population in the area and adults surrounding these mental health problems with her staff at her clinic called Tech Connect Reset Family Counseling. She's just brought on a number of new clinicians. They use evidence-based therapy, and she's just does an excellent job working with families and young people in the community. She also has a nonprofit called Galopsi. I was so afraid I was going to mispronounce that, but it's an equine evidence-based therapy center for adolescents and children who are severely ill. And really just when she was young, she worked as a sports camp instructor in summer camp, and that's really where she found her passion, that she loved working with young people and adolescents, and she continues to do this great work. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Virginie. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Heather. I wanted to, thank Mrs. Heather, Valentine and Notre Dame for, hosting this webinar on screen addiction. And I also wanted, to share that for me, it's been a pleasure to be able to collaborate with Notre Dame for, this past 10 years, probably more than 10 years, and for seeing, Notre Dame growing and be able to support their students, on an academic and emotional level as, time changes and it's hard, to follow through sometimes. So you guys are doing such an amazing job supporting your students. So I'm going to start. And so today the topic is about, screen addiction. Of course, we're going to talk about the definition. We're going to address the risk factors that contribute to screen addiction, and also the protective factors, because that can allow family to knowing that how much protective factors you have that can help with to do a good prevention, to help the children, not being addicted, or to actually help them to decrease the bad habits. And then definitely we are going to talk about the parenting tools. So I'm trying to see, sorry, I have trouble with my own camera. Yeah, so that being said, I'm going to be quick on the definition, because as people know, there is no definition about screen addiction. The closest definition would be internet gaming disorder from the DSM-5, and the World Health Organization back in 2018 defined the internet gaming disorder. But at this time, there is no diagnosis about screen addiction itself. So, and most of the time, what you have to know is when we talked about screen addiction, addiction, when we talk about addiction, it's really any addiction, it takes something away from the person's life. And we're going to address, when we work with children and when you see your own children, have developing bad habits with the screen that can become, screen addiction, you're going to start seeing there is 5 or 6 areas that I will share with you today, that you want to keep an eye on those areas, because if the child is developing bad habits with screen addiction, or has screen addiction, it's going to impact one of their 5 or 6 areas in their life. But definitely this what is screen addiction? We would define, a child or even an adult would be diagnosed with internet gaming disorder from these 9 criteria. But if you look at the behavior is related to screen problems, they all have these issues. At least 5 of these criteria would be, a sign that the child is really on the, on the path of having a screen addiction. So preoccupation, or obsession with for instance, playing video games or being on the social media all the time. Withdrawal symptoms, when and this is probably one of the main concerns for the parents, when you take the screen away, so then the kid is developing anxiety, irritability, sadness. The tolerance, the more time the kid would spend on the screen, the more they would want to spend time on it. And they completely lose control of their time. They can lose interest, in any other activities, and even with family time. And they continue to overuse, the screen, despite of the, developing problem they have around school and friendship and family. And they are very, deceiving. And of course, they use the screen, and we will talk more about that, as a way to relieve, some negative mood. And definitely, they continue to be at risk for jeopardizing their job or their school. So this presentation about the risk factors, it's we gathered this research like over the past few months, and it's all of the data around the US and all around the world about what would be the risk factor of screen addiction. And so we pulled out like about 5 or 6 criteria factors. Definitely the age, the time spent on the screen, mental health diagnosis, relationship with the internet or perceived internet characteristic. I will explain that. Environmental factors and parenting style. So the age is definitely, it doesn't start when the kids are like 10-year-old or teenager. It starts at a very early age, and there is like a lot of literature around those young kids who are like in preschool age that been showing like the more time they spend on screen and the more they present like a delay in language and communication and motor skills. And like, you will see this research, it's one of the research in Canada, kids who are like starting at 24-month-old. But definitely among the studies, like the most vulnerable population are the adolescents 13 to 15 years old. So like you see, a child who was 15 in 2015, a child who was 15 in 2015 already has many hours on the screen at 10-year-old for industrial and rich countries. Adolescents at the highest proportion of high-risk internet dependence, I can explain, followed by adults and then children. So the most vulnerable populations are the teenagers, then the adults, and then the children. And so the survey results from different countries, like from Italy and some other countries in Europe and also the US. So second risk factor is the time. I have families who come to see me and they say, oh, today, my child is spending so much time on the screen, but it's not just one criteria. Like we have to see, the time they spend on the screen and their behavior related to the screen when it's time to stop the screen. But definitely, many studies show like, over the time when the teens spend more time over the years, between 3 to 5 hours, for recreational time, which means like not spending time for homework, they are really at risk, spending more time on the screen to develop, addiction to screen. And it's mostly related for the population, for the children who spend a lot of time on social media. And so as they increase their time on the screen every year, so then they are more at risk. And it's usually probably 4 or 5 for over 4 years, like as they increase, 1 hour a day. And we have to keep an eye on that. The third factor about risk, third risk factor, it's mental health, definitely. And I started being interested in this topic of screen addiction because when I was running programs for in intensive care, when children are hospitalized, discharged from the hospital, had to get like intensive treatment, not just like therapy once a week, but like having therapy several times a week. Just like when we break a leg, we need to go to like physical therapy several times a week at the beginning to, for the recovery. So what I have noticed is like when the children were starting having, problem with their screen, and then back in 2013, you would see those kids going to the hospital because the parents would take the computer away as they were spending too much time on the screen. And then at that time, there were not much program about how to address this behavior. And some places would just maybe address the screen problem, or they would address, depression or anxiety. So what we do at the clinic, and why I was interested, I developed a program around treating screen addiction. It's like a dual diagnosis, where not only we treat the behavior with the screen, the relationship with the screen, but we treat the underlying problem. And many, many times, we see that the child who has bad habits with the screen, not to say that addiction, but bad habits and addiction to screen, we share like we give parents like additional questionnaires to see that what's the underlying problem. And most of the time with mental health factors, it's usually many times depression or ADHD and impulsivity and aggression. Also some kids who are in a spectrum, kids in a trauma and personality types, not so much what we see at the practice, but this is what the literature shows all over the world over the past few years. So depression, people are going to tell me, is the screen the root cause? Is the screen like the problem, like for depression? Like is the screen causing depression? Is the screen causing suicide? It doesn't cause the diagnosis, but it triggers the diagnosis. And I think we all have like predisposition to have, just like being introvert and extrovert. So some people have predisposition to have depression, and definitely after COVID, those numbers are like before COVID. People who have the tendency to be depressed or anxious, they're spending more time on the screen kind of exacerbate, the symptoms. So back in 2017, there were like a study on students between 13 to 17, I guess. And there were about 500,000, like 500,000 kids who went on the survey. And on this 500,000, sample, like almost 50% of those kids who were spending more than 5 hours a day were reporting like a suicidal feeling and suicidal behavior, as opposed to, which is 20% a lot as well, like kids who were spending only 1 hour a day. 20% of these 500,000 kids would report that they would feel suicidal. So spending less time on the screen definitely, trigger less symptoms. Depressive behavior were more common in teens who spend a lot of time on their device. And of course, that research shows that the more time you spend, the more time you're away from the screen, the more you engage in like, social activities with peers and sport and activities. So the less symptoms you have. So depression, suicidal behavior, like I mentioned, spending more time on the screen, it's really increasing the severity of depression. What we have to know, depression is more associated with kids who spend more time on social media and also television. There were no association between depression and the time spent on the video games, for the certain amount of hours spent on, each year. I mean, parents don't tell that to your kids who are spending time on video games because there's going to be an excuse for them to spend more time on the screen. So yes, kids who play video games, there is no correlation between kids spending maybe 10 hours on playing video games and having depression. But it will show like more aggressive behavior. Depression is not associated with computer use or video games. ADHD impulsivity. So as we may know, ADHD doesn't always show impulsivity, but impulsivity is correlated with the symptoms of ADHD. And so a lot of kids who have symptoms of ADHD and present impulsivity, well, I'll give you an example. So people who have ADHD, so there is basically 2 types, deficiency, deficit of attention, where people have a hard time to concentrate, but they are not impulsive or hyperactive. And then you have the population where the child would have problem concentrating because it would be hyperactive. So definitely kids who have, some symptoms of ADHD impulsivity, they are more at risk to develop like addiction to screen, especially the teens who play video games. And the impulsivity is related to like craving and dysfunctional coping with affective mood, which increase the addictive behavior. The aggression is also a predictor of internet. So in multiple research in the US and other research in Asia, it shows like aggression is a predictor of internet addiction. And definitely individual with a high level of aggression also has a tendency toward internet addiction. Part of mental health, risk factors. So personality, I mean, we work with teenagers, so we don't see so much of that, but it is true. The research shows that for teens and older population, that any personality around introversion, inhibition, submissiveness, lack of self-esteem, interpersonal sensibility, like when people are really highly sensitive, OCD, tendency, obsessive compulsive tendency, social anxiety, hostility. And we do understand that some of these behaviors, can fall into a diagnosis, but a lot of those behaviors are also related to personality. The trauma, so there is research related to trauma. There's, adolescents who have suffered from childhood trauma use the internet as a form of escape, and we can talk more about that, and spending a large number of hours in front of the screen, which means like we have to be careful with that. So trauma and like, being bullied. So a lot of kids would go on the screen and find ways to really, soothe and be able to connect with other people, but they're also more at risk because they are more vulnerable. So perception internet characteristics. So this means, how do people engage with the screen? How do they engage with the screen with the others? And they meet other people easily, and it's easy for people to meet other people that way because they can be anonymous, they can change their name, definitely. The other characteristic about developing addiction, and that way using the screen, really connecting with other people, it's also there is a lot of like research around, developing the addiction related to pornography, which is not new, but it's a concern. The environment is also a risk factor. So the access to the screen, like I mentioned, there is research the kids are like as early as 24-month old. They could spend like almost 18 hours a week on the screen, which is a lot for like preschoolers. So the more they're exposed and the more they're at risk, so the environment is like really impacting the child and the behavior and the risk to be spending more time on the screen because they have access to everything. There is this research in Korea. They have what they call PC Cafe. I've never been there, but I heard it's a nice country. I want to go soon. PC Cafe is like places where it's like this, like not Starbucks cafe, but people can go there, they plug their computer, and then you can be on the screen, so many hours. And that kind of environment, like there is a correlation with this kind of environment and addiction to screen. So too many hours accessing the screen has definitely consequence on sleep, mood. There is other research I could go into detail about like how much screen is impacting the sleep and how much there is a correlation between lack of sleep, depression, and spending too much time on the screen. Exposure, yes, so it's definitely the exposure, definitely environment exposure, like the type of activities people do on the screen and what they access is really, it's a concern. And during COVID, I had kids of 10-year-old parents came to see me because they went on the screen and they developed, pornography at 10-year-old by accident, but then it was very hard to break the cycle. This one is my favorite topic. So the risk factor for children to develop, addiction to screen, parenting style is very important. We can definitely talk more about it. So for your knowledge, there is like 4 types of parenting style. Authoritative, which means parents is highly involved and very strict. You need to do this, you can do that, but I take this away. But they are very involved. The child doesn't have so much choices. The authoritarian parents is also strict, but is not really involved. It's just, give the rules, but they are not really participating, in reinforcing the rules. Indulgent, it's like high on involvement and low on strictness. So more parents who are like laid back, they're like, involved with the child, they play with the child, or this is cool, and they are not very strict. And then neglectful, which is probably the most damaging, where parents are not involved and they give a lot of freedom to the child. So definitely parenting rules and communication when parents are not on the same page. I mean, I've been working with a lot of parents where for them it's they always have the same goal for the child, but they have a different approach. And so when the parenting style is also dysfunctional, so it creates discrepancy for the child and doesn't have clear expectations. So example like laxness, like overreactivity is correlated with greater screen time related to child behavior, low parenting self-efficacy, screen time related, behavioral problem were really a strong predictor for, parents who are not efficient. And the less the parents are involved and the less the parents are, the more they are, tolerant. You see here. So parents who are less strict and less involved are really correlated to more autonomy for the child with the screen as a result, and spend more time on the screen, and they'll be more at risk. So definitely lack of rules and boundaries. And again, lack of rules and boundaries doesn't mean you have to be strict and mean and punitive, but it's really having a positive discipline, having clear communication with the child, clear expectations, to avoid, the confusion and the chaos, and, having clear rules at home about when we can use the device, when we should stop using the device. And I do know I have, my daughters are older. One is a young adult. I mean, they are two young adults, and one was 18 years old last year, so still young. And I feel like I think our generation is still we are still the guinea pig of this generation. We are like, they were born with the screen, but parents, we didn't have the tools to help to regulate, the screen use with the child. So I'm hoping the future generation, children who are like maybe were born now and they are currently 10 years old, I think their parents have more chances to reduce that screen addiction. Protective factors, family cohesion, family functioning, family resilience, family showing affection, and less parental conflicts. You guys can contact me anytime I can explain. So, but definitely having healthy communication, that is not extreme communication from like being not involved, not communicating to like over communicating and creating a lot of conflict. So it's important to have a good balance with that. Protective factor school is really important, and teacher support, support from the school itself. Like, school like Notre Dame has, Notre Dame, I would say in French, has a great support for their students, as they have like services, with counseling. And we have been working with many students from Notre Dame, and they really appreciate having support from the school on the emotional level and also academic. So teacher support, attitude toward academic activities, your relationship with peers, no bullying. So we have to make sure schools enforce that, and less pressure with school, and also school programs. So there were research about school programs. I can't remember which country it was, but they had school program for the kids they were involving them in programs. So kids were busy after school, and they were pretty successful. Those factors are reducing the risk to screen addiction. Other protective factors, like, of course, trying to keep your child, having a structure after school, positive physical development, academic. If your child is highly motivated for school, it's good, but we also have to be careful about not having them being stressed with the school. Good self-esteem, good emotional self-regulation, good coping skills, engagement with connections, and two more of the following, like school, peers, being involved in athletic programs, culture, religion, sort of different communities. This way that gives support to the child. Presence of having mentors, and to support development of skills, interests, or maybe kids who were like in Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts. Opportunity for engagement, positive norms, clear expectations for behavior, physical and psychological safety. Family will provide a structure and limits, rules monitoring, definitely like showing clear expectation and boundaries. Supportive relationship with family member, which means like that's really important. I would say the risk factors that we need to keep in mind is more the relationship with the screen, like what the kid is doing on the screen, not like you're going to supervise this, like monitor the screen activities, but having what kind of relationship they have with the screen, how do they use the screen, having the kids, involved with social, and definitely having a good family support. And if you have a child who is like having a hard time, at school or with peers, doesn't tell you, and start cutting and spend too much time on the screen, as parents, you definitely, you probably stressed, but you want to be supportive. And so, yes, definitely maybe reaching help with your support you have from school, try to work on that together, or with professional outside school, where if the child is cutting and spending too much time on the screen, doesn't have a healthy relationship with the screen, you want to be able to see it and say, explore the problem, what is going on, and and not punishing the behavior and not feeling upset about the behavior, because that's going to make things worse on the child. So yeah, so like a relationship with the screen and parental support is the best. So parenting tools. So 12 years old and younger. So I think you guys can share the slides, and there is parenting tools for younger population. For teenagers, definitely having a positive parenting. It's really being warm and firm, and having clear rules. Work on communication, a lot of validation. Like, for instance, if you have a child, has been spending too much time on the screen and start having lower grade and start like feeling kind of like distant with you, you don't want to like have, make accusation, what's wrong with you? Like, you want to be able to open the communication, and it starts with validation. Like, validation would be like, oh yeah, so if the child said, oh, I don't want to go to school today, then the parents would be able to say, okay, I understand. Like, it's not like you support the idea the child doesn't want to school, but you want to validate the ideas, and the child will listen to you better, and you will or have an open communication if you validate your child first. So I'll give you an example. So let's say I have my boss, and like my boss took away, I'm a project manager, my boss took away a project without telling me very clearly, and then he made me upset. And I go and to talk to my best friend, and my best friend, I say, my boss took my project away and I'm not happy. So validation would be like, oh, I understand, I'm sorry, this is not a cool situation, that would be validation. Then I would be more open to my friend's suggestions, say, what would you like to do about it? Why do you want to change it up? Do you want to talk to your boss? And that's validation. Low validation would be, you know what, get over it or find another job and move on. That's not validation. So with your teenagers, you really want to validate them regardless of the idea there. So you're validating the underlying feeling, not the statement of what they say. They said, I don't want to go to school, I don't want to do my homework, I don't want to take a break on my screen. We get that. So the validation say, okay, I got it. And the next step is like, you parents, you're not here to provide a solution for your children either. You want to be there to work on solution together. And I understand, like, when the child comes to you and has stress, that stresses you as parents, and it creates anxiety. And as a result, you want to work on the solution and find, a solution to resolve the problem. But it's like jumping too fast to the solution. And you work on the solution and you carry your own anxiety, and it's not helpful. So what you really want to do is really, validating, try to understand what happened. And with teenagers, don't try to use the word why, because they hate it, but in your head it would be more like why, but like you verbalize the question by like, oh, what happened that you don't want to go to school today? What is going on? Can you share more? And then the child may say, yes, I don't want to go to school, I had a bad grade yesterday, or I've been bullied. And then say, okay, so maybe let's go through the day together and just work on solution together. And what do you think? Like, and you propose like option A or B, and the child can make, a decision. And you don't want to impose any solutions either. Yes, parents need to be aligned, same thing, and I know there is single family, single parents. But it's better to have both parents involved and be aligned on the same goals. But sometimes it's only one parent involved, and it's, the most important thing is to be consistent for sure. I had some parents who were asking me, oh, can I use blockers? I would really use blockers like if the child is unsafe and has used the screen in an unhealthy way. Yeah, the FDA would say, oh, no more than 2 hours a day, but can be negotiated. Again, it depends on the child's behavior, the relationship, with the screen. Definitely no device in the bedroom, but I know I have a lot of parents who are going to say, my child is a teenager and she's refusing to put her phone outside the bedroom. We can talk more about it. But try to provide an environment that stimulates the child without screen activities. No food in the house, no food while using the screen, and try to have, family dinner or like family time as much as possible and organize that in the schedule. So time management is really important for the kids. Over 24 hours, this is where the time would go. Of course, that would be the ideal. Teenagers should sleep more than 7 hours, but when they have a lot of homework, so it's basically 7 hours, 6 hours. Some kids will spend 2.5 hours, which is a lot on this pie, but at least an hour and a half a day. And the rest of the time should be, or even with tutoring, that can include tutoring, but should be involved in activities, community, some family time, and then which doesn't give too much time for screen time, which should be no more than 2 hours a day on social media, even texting. So in summary, parenting tools, it's also a lot of you will be more successful to apply those tools if you do a great job on validation and really praising your child and try to keep a positive mind, not saying, oh, good job, or but it's really say, I see you're trying. I see your mood was better today than yesterday. You can just make small, feedback this way. Definitely. So when I was talking about the addiction, it's taking something away from people's life, and what do you want to keep pay attention to. It's to say, so if my child is spending too much time on screen, so where is the screen, its behavior impacting his life? Is that impacting his life school, grades, homework? Is that impacting his environment with social, kids tend to socialize less in person? Is that impacting the after school activities or the relationship with the family or the sleep or appetite? So yeah, there is a bunch of questions you can ask parents. You can ask yourself, where is my child losing interest? Where is my child becoming dysfunctional because of the screen use? Yeah, so that would be some question you can ask yourself. Sleep, appetite, do the kids sleep meals? Because especially for kids who play video games, so we see that a lot. And also you parents, look at your own habits. What are your habits? And do you have a hard time taking a break from the screen? I personally do. I'm trying to be more mindful of that. Are you able to stay away from the screen, for an hour or during dinner? Do you have nomophobia, which was a word in, a new word coin for people who are scared to lose their phone? I'm always scared to lose my phone, and I lose my phone, but I find it and I'm okay. Yeah, so the balance for parents, this is what you want to keep in mind. It's either parents have a very unhealthy routine to a too structured routine. So you want to be more in the middle of that. Some families, I understand, they don't want any electronics at home, too much electronics. We live in this modern world where we cannot live without the internet anymore. So I think we want to teach the child to live with the screen, and monitor the time. It's the philosophy we have at the clinic. It's really developing, a balance using the screen. You want to include the screen in your life, but it's a balance, right? Parenting has to be positive as much as possible, even though the problem is difficult to resolve. And you want to be more on the right side about rules and expectation than on the left side. Communication, effective listening, talk with your child, rules and boundaries. You as parents, you want to model a behavior and you want to address, you know, the underlying problems. Time management is important. Some blockers, we pass that. And yeah, don't wait for the help. So I know you have teenagers. I don't know if you have younger kids, but really try to look for support. It doesn't have to be therapy, but look for support. And there is blogs, and there is like, even when I talk to your school, like when the kids are younger and you start seeing some problem, and it's really about well, I did some presentation in other schools where kids were more like elementary school and middle school age. Parents are telling me like, what are the rules? And the rules is more about look at your child's behavior when it's time to stop the screen. If the child has, tantrums and difficulty to stop using the screen, so then you need to implement different rules because the kid doesn't have the tools to regulate himself at the time to stop the screen. So it's really about the behavior related to the screen activity at the time to stop. And for us, we do everything we can to support families, when they come to our office. We treat screen addiction. We do like a lot of mental health support in terms of like the staff I have and myself, we have training on kids who have severe symptoms of depression, anxiety, and a lot of time they have screen problems. So we also address that. So we send a bunch of questionnaires to assess, the situation. And then we develop a treatment plan for families to give them support and evidence-based approach as much as possible, very customized. Do you have some research here I can show you? And then, yes, I think you can also do that and have a dog and that can like grabs everything and eat everything. So I guess I'm done with the presentation not done with the presentation, but like I'm available to answer questions. Sorry.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Virginie. I was actually taking notes that there were so many things you talked about that I feel like overlaps in the work we do. And I liked how you said, you'll often, because I often get the question too of, are the screens causing depression? Is this causing this? And how you kind of highlighted that it's a predisposition. And I think that is what we see often in these kind of behaviors with young adults. So thank you again. But we do have a number of questions that I would love to get to. So one of the questions that came through is, there's a lot of social pressure and peer pressure with some of the things like joint games or social media where people are interacting with each other. How can parents deal with that? Because it isn't just, it feels more like it's not just their kid on the platform, but oh, my friends and I are all on this platform together doing this activity.
Yeah, so I'm reading the questions. Yeah, this is like the topic related to like the relationship with the screen, like what do kids do with the screen? Like, so they have there is a social media, and as you know, all of these social media who have, the companies who create those social medias and video games, like we have no control on that. And definitely the kids starting using, it's also, the time is important. So if you see your child like spending so much time on like, TikTok, like 5 hours a day, that's not okay. So in terms of time, this is something you have to have the child, you have to monitor, right? And then the peer pressure, again, I always believe in like communication and try to, if you see something is not right with your child, like really having a conversation and say, hey, how is that going right now? And maybe I see you, try to open your child's mind. We are parents, we are not, you're therapists, I'm a therapist, but like when we are parents, it's not about trying to fix the child or like we are here to listen and try to understand like the meaning, what is going on. The child has been so precious. It has to do with self-esteem too, so
Wonderful. There was a couple questions that actually came to me through the chat. And by the way, everyone who's listening, please pop your questions in the Q&A or the chat, and we'll get to those. And one that came through was, how do I explain to my child why this is important? Or how can I try to explain to them why it's important for them to reduce the time on screens? Because I understand as a parent, but how can I kind of talk to my teen about that?
Well, how old is the child?
I don't have an exact age, but let's say sophomore, so maybe 15 or 16.
Yes, I guess the older, I would treat teenagers not like my friends, but like the kid is going to be this 16, they're going to be 18 in 2 years, right? So if the child is not able to be, it's also, as parents, we model the behavior. So being able to say, hey, maybe let's go for a walk or talk and, say, what do you think is, ask the child, what do you think is important? How do you monitor your time? How do you manage your time? What is, so, and then little by little, like have the child to realize, if the child may say, yes, I'm happy this way, which is not true, but it's really having an open conversation about, yeah, like it's also having the parents, not a judgmental eye and say like, oh, you spend too much time on the phone, and then it's like you want to say, this is what I have noticed, and really having an open conversation together and say, this is what I have noticed. What do you think? Maybe the teenager will be in denial and be like, no, I'm fine. And say, well, I'm trying to like have a conversation with you. So if you don't want to have this conversation, I understand that. But I see something that is not going in the right direction. So is it okay to allow? Okay, go ahead.
No, it's okay. You got it. Next question was, is it okay to allow more hours of screen time on the weekend if the teen is really compliant and with rules and limits during the week? And is 5 to 6 hours, which is actually more gaming versus social media, okay for a weekend for a teen? Kind of 5 to 6 hours each day.
I mean, well, 5, 6 hours on the weekend, it's not impossible, but I hope it's not per day. Not 5 or 6 hours on Saturday and 5 or 6 hours on Sunday. This is too much.
Okay.
But maybe, if this is an older teenager who is reasonable and love video games and can spend 2.5 hours spending time on video game with their friends, Saturday and 2 hours on Sunday, something like that. It also depends on the activities, but it should not be something like said, okay, so now this is the weekend, I can just spend my time on playing video games and I kind of squash the other, squash the other activities. So it's always a balance, right?
Yeah, no, right. Okay, this is a great, I think this is a very prevalent question I often get as well. In this day and age, almost all homework requires a computer. Totally true. So it's much harder to regulate hours that the teens are on the screens because, they can often say, and it's often true, I'm on here to do homework, I'm on here to do a group project. It's also really common now for kids to be chatting with friends or having friends on video while they're doing their homework. But the homework, of course, is then taking much longer than it should, or it's not completed with that same level of focus. And this is something that this parent is asking, kind of, how do they monitor or regulate that?
This is a great question. Because what I realize as I work with the kids, and you probably see that with yourself, like our generation, we learn how to we have this computer, but I don't know, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, it was just for work, right? Mm-hmm. Or some emails when we started having emails. And then then they would add the video games, right? But now you can find everything on the phone, and then the iPad is the Apple devices are connected to the phone, so they can do everything on every screen. And so I think the knowledge for the kids would be to be able to divide manage their time and divide their devices. So if you really want to play video games, well, there is this TV, you can play video game on the screen, with the TV in the living room, right? And if this is about friends, you can use your text. So if the kids has problem like managing their time, so once they do well, but really managing their time, that they should have basically like a device for something specific. Computer should be just homework, and I know parents are going to tell me, but we cannot control YouTube, and I get that, but having conversation about, dividing the time, maybe having a chart and say, hey, this is the computer, kids are like 13 years old, the computer is for homework, emails, doing some research like YouTube, but it has to be little. TV should be for like games or like watching, Netflix or stuff like that. And if you have a phone, yes, that should be more for like, socializing, friendships, and some social media on it, but not on the computer.
It is hard. I would say too, one thing I've talked about with families over time is sometimes,
Yes.
not letting kids study in their room as much as they would like to, and having them have like a designated spot in the house for homework. And it might be, I know everyone's living situation is different, but if it's possible, it could be in more of a community area or a living room or a kitchen. And no, you're not going to catch everything, but at least you can kind of start to monitor things a little bit more. But that's also another one too, is a lot of times I hear from parents that the teen is holed up in their bedroom and they say they're doing homework, and it kind of looks like they are, but it is really hard to regulate that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and I mean, if the teen is older, like teenager, and the time management is terrible. I think they need a reset, which is hard for parents. But if the kid is younger, like, 12, 13, and they started having all of these things, first of all, parents, I think, when they buy them a new device, they need to put the parameters on it. And so, yeah, social media, it's like, teenagers no more than 1 hour a day, I think it's good enough, right? And having the parameter and say, hey, you use this device for like schoolwork and use this device, for like calling me, or like, the phone is basically, a safety thing for some parents, so they use the phone for socializing or for calling or maybe GPS, or weather, but not on the computer. So we have to be firm with that. If the kid is doing well, I don't mind, but
That's a great point. Like that's another barometer you can use as a parent, is if you notice the grades are slipping or they're not doing as well, then you have more, that's more of like a reason that you can use. But okay. All right, this one is a good one too, I think. My child believes that she will not fit in or be popular if she is not constantly keeping up with her friends' Instagrams, chats, what have you. Every time I take her phone away, she literally falls apart.
yeah,
Any thoughts on that?
I'm really sorry. It's really common. Yeah, I mean, I would start with conversation, and also we cannot, I mean, first of all, there should not be like physical, I don't know if they were like physical, grabbing the phone from the kid's hand. So you don't want any physical, interaction that way. We should reset about having conversations. Say, you know what, can we talk for a minute? Because I'm losing track right now of what's going on, right? And it's not like it's not like I want to take your phone away, but like, hey, what's going on? I know you like your screen time, but just maybe parents can say, hey, this is where does your time go? Like you have school, you have sleep, and I'm happy that you spend time with your screen on but you don't want to like. And being popular, it's also having, I believe the kids who spend time on social media, it's a way to connect. I mean, it's hard to take the screen away when it's actually they connect with that. So yeah, it's definitely monitoring the time, and also we don't want to take the screen away with no warning or with no plans. So that's why I believe, we should be able to sit and talk and make a plan together. What's the problem? What's the solution? Right?
Absolutely.
So, and I know it's all emotional, but there is different techniques that we can use that are like where people involve their emotion less and feel more, healthy communication, healthy plans. I'm positive. That's positive. We need to stay positive.
Absolutely. Okay, this one's interesting. Is watching YouTube videos considered social media? My daughter loves to watch mostly how-to videos like crafts, sewing, and those kinds of things.
Great question. Yes, that has to do with like how is the child relating to, what's the relationship with the screen, right? And so it's about, okay, so if my child wants to use YouTube to do craft or sewing, which is cool, I think, it also depends on the number of hours and the time of the day, right? If the child say like, oh, I really want to watch YouTube to like, do my sewing, but like I have to do my homework. Okay, let's talk about it, and again, just in the kid's mind, you never say no to the kid. You just like make a plan. You say, because I'm not saying no, but it's like, well, let's organize that a little bit, right? It's like talking to a toddler and say, I want the cookie before dinner. And the parent saying, no, you're not going to have the cookie. So then the kid has a tantrum and, roll on the ground and cries and scream. But if you tell the toddler, say, you can have your cookie, but you're going to have dinner now. So giving the feeling like it can access the cookie at some point, the kid will be more patient. So same thing, like it's really weighing like how much time they spend on the screen and how much time they spend watching those YouTube videos and what time of the day.
Okay. I think we got time for a couple more. My kids only have screen time on weekends in the living room, but do you think 5 hours each weekend day watching movies, video games, excluding texting friends and homework, would you recommend we cut down on the weekend screen time?
Well, it depends on the age again, like, if my child is like even 12 years old, 13 years and has 5 hours each weekend, it might be a little too much. And again, it depends on the time management and if the kid does well. And because sometimes that should not be like, okay, so today every weekend you have 5 hours and the kid is like over focused on that. You should just say, okay, let's look, let's see how the weekend goes, because sometimes it can be like, having friends over and maybe they can watch 2 movies.
Oh, and not to interrupt, but I think we have an update. The ages are 11 and 14.
Okay, 14. Yeah, so have a conversation and say, well, I don't want you to be so over focused on like I give you 5 hours a weekend, and I'm going to cut that down. Like maybe it should be at the beginning to implement good habits. It should be conversation. Say, okay, so this weekend, let's say it's Monday or Tuesday. I'm okay that you get 5 hours, like between Saturday and Sunday total. But I don't want this to be like just granted and just like, feel like, oh, I get my ice cream every weekend, no matter what, right? It's like it depends on the activities. Like, so I just try to weigh, the time management with the child and see how it goes. If things go well, why not? Or there be some issues, let's review that.
Wonderful. Well, okay, I'm looking at the time and I like
1 minute.
we have 1 minute left. So I feel like we don't really have any time, but there are more great questions that are coming through, which I think just shows how important this topic is and how helpful this has been as a resource. So I guess I want to put out there for everyone, Virginie has been very gracious in saying you can contact her. And I think you said we could share your slides. So we'll share the slides, I'll share the recording. But you can reach out to her directly and email her questions. And also to, your school counselors, we are here. We know your teens, so you can always reach out to us if you have questions or concerns. And again, I know we didn't get to everyone's question. Definitely tried our best, but just thank you again, Virginie, so much for your knowledge and guidance and really opening up this conversation. I think it impacts all of us. I mean, as you're talking, I always feel like there's things that as an adult, I mean, I can understand, I can relate. I'm on my phone more than I should be, and all of those things.
Yes. Thank you very much. And, families, feel free, professional families, feel free to email me. I'm faster on, via email than phone call. I have so many voicemail, but email me. You can also text. I'm very flexible. So I'm happy. I'm just happy to help. Like having, collaboration is great. And I really wanted to thank you, Heather, and thank you, Notre Dame. And it's always a pleasure to collaborate with you and do this presentation. So.
All right, you as well. All right, well, I'm going to sign off now. And like I said, to everyone who's watching, thank you. And please reach out if you have questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.